or doing anything like that. Because what if this were to actually happen in your classroom, and it doesn't make a difference like if you're in the elementary, or middle school, or secondary, or higher ed level. What if this happened? What would you do? And there are a number of individuals that I personally know that they would shut down class. They would say, we can't do it, we got to reschedule a meeting or anything like that. So what we're going to do if this doesn't work, and this is what I do the real deal, I say keep it real. So I try to keep it real. So we're going to keep it real. If this doesn't work, then we're going to become one cozy, happy family. And I'm serious. We're all going to come together, and we're going to move Michelle's laptop close so that we can all see the presentation, so that we can be on one accord. Oh, look, voila. All right. So let's give it up for Michelle. Let's give it up for Michelle. All right. So today, basically, what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about how we can heighten the academic success of African American students, utilizing universal design for learning and culturally responsive teaching. And basically, what these two frameworks do is they're kind of at an intersect. And so a colleague and I, Dr. Nancy Admiral and I, she specializes in universal design for learning, and I'm always talking about being culturally responsive and the importance that we make sure we're culturally responsive. We discovered that there's a happy medium between both of these models. And so we start working together to help others have a general understanding. Again, it doesn't make a difference if we're talking about elementary, middle school, high school, secondary, across the board, or the collegiate level. What do we need to do to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the diverse students that are coming into our classrooms, because our classrooms are increasingly becoming more diverse. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at universal design for learning to make sure that we have a full understanding of what UPL is. Take a look at culturally responsive teaching and see what culturally responsive teaching is, and then really dive into culture and pedagogy to make sure that we have a full understanding that when we're working with diverse students, that we're doing what's in the best interest to meet the needs of those students. So removing yourself from the picture, because I think a lot of times what happens with us as individuals is we get caught up in I, what I do as the educator, what you do as a supervisor, and has nothing to absolutely do with you when you talk about meeting the needs of the population that you're responsible for serving. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to ask everybody to stand up so we can get pumped up. This is something I've been doing for the past 22 years, and I did it at all levels. One of the things that you can do to make sure that everybody has a full understanding on what we're bringing to the table and what the expectation is we're going to do a class model and a class poem. And on the count of 3, I'm going to ask everybody, let's do it together. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. This day has been. That's right there. 1.
Oh, we're reading that together.
Together. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
This day has been given to me fresh and clear. I can either use it or throw it away. I promise that I will use this day to the fullest, realizing that it will never come back again. I realize that this is my life to use or throw away.
I say, are we motivated? You say,
motivated, motivated, downright motivated. Right on, Mr. Smith. Right on.
Good. We'll do one more. Now we have 2 poems. The first one is called Excuses. Together.
Excuses are monuments of nothing that build bridges that lead to nowhere. And those who use these tools of incompetence are masters of nothing. Therefore, we do not use excuses.
Task.
Once the task has begun, never leave until it's done. Whether the task be great or small, do it right or not at all.
Let's be seated. And then I'll kind of go into why we do the poems and why we do the mottos. So, I've been in education for 22 years. I've had the opportunity to be at the elementary, middle, high school, and collegiate level. And what I discovered when I first started teaching is that one of my colleagues, Mr. Stevenson, Heighten, his classroom was like 2 doors down from me, and I would always hear him doing something with his students. So I was a newbie, and so I'm like, what is he doing? This is pretty cool. I want to know what he's doing. So I would leave my room and kind of go and stand by his door and look in there and see what he's doing. So then I was like, hey, what is this that you're doing with your students? He was like, hey, I stole it from Marva Collins, so you can steal it from me. This is a model that Marva Collins did with her students. And if you know anything about Marva Collins is a rock star teacher. The sister is a bad mood student. So if you have any student, I don't care what behavior problem they have, I don't care what type of problem they have, Marva Collins is going to make your student a rock star. So if you haven't heard about Marva Collins, or if you don't know anything about Marva Collins, you need to investigate your sister because she's a bad sister. And so then the two mottos in the poems, I got the second half of the motto from the United States Army, because I was in the United States Army, so in the military. So hoorah. So you got to be pumped up, you got to be motivated, you got to be ready to go into this thing called education. And then the two poems, Excuses and Tasks, I'm a member of the best sorority ever on the planet, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So as a member of that sorority, this is something that we learned. And so what I learned by using that with students as well as adults is it helps us create a climate and a culture that is conducive to teaching and learning. And so when we talk about universal design for learning, when we talk about being culturally responsive, it's not just about you or me, the educator, who is responsible for educating the student. Education is a facilitation, meaning we're all working together. So it doesn't make a difference if we're talking about the little babies who are in preschool, or if we're talking about the big people that most of us work with on a collegiate level. If what you're doing is not beneficial to the students that you serve, you need to redo it. I'm going to say that one more again. I use ebonics a lot, so I want you to know that we're all professionals, but when you're presenting and when you're talking with different populations, I'm going to say keep it real. Keep it real so that everybody can be engaged. Because one of the things with universal design for learning is that you have multiple means of engagement. So everybody does not want to hear somebody that is going to be professional at all times. So you kind of bring it down sometimes so we can be happy and have fun when we're talking about providing quality education. So again, when we look at these models and we look at the students that we are responsible for educating on a daily basis, there sometimes is, before we can even go to that about there being a disconnect, we have to take a look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it in our classrooms. And look at the students that are coming into our classrooms that we're responsible for educating. And before we began this, the prior speaker in front of me, Michelle, was talking about literacy and our literacy rates. And then we had a discussion at the table about what is it that's happening, what can we do? Do we see some of these problems with students that are actually in higher education? And the answer is yes. So what is happening? What is going on? What's going on is that there's a disconnect, and we need to make sure that we do something to make sure that all of us is on the same page. Because if we continue to do business as usual, we're going to continue to have a problem. So, one of the things when we talk about this disconnect, similar to you, Michelle, I'm just thinking, and I'm thinking about students. I'm just like, okay, there's a disconnect. How did this disconnect come about? So again, it doesn't make a difference if we're talking about elementary, middle school, high school, or students on the collegiate level. A disconnect has happened. So I came up with this concept called Smith's Model of Educational Excellence. So the student supposedly, notice I use the word supposedly, is supposed to be the focus of all our efforts, because everything that we're doing is supposed to be what is in the best interest of the student. The student travels between these four entities: the home, the school, the community, and the church, or a faith-based organization. So if you're a spiritual person, whatever you call your higher being, your spiritual being, that's that. So they travel between these four entities, but these four entities are disconnected. So the student, therefore, is disconnected from these entities. So what has happened that has caused the student to be disconnected from these four entities? I want us to think about it. So most of us in the room, we have an idea of Wally and Beaver Cleveland. So we know about Leave It to Beaver. So when we think about Leave It to Beaver, when we think about that, there was a very tight-knit, very close family. Everybody just had it going on. Dad went to work, mom stayed at home, kids went to school. It was just a happy-go-lucky American family. Then we fast forward to the Cosby Show. Yes, Cliff Huxtable and Clay. They also had it going on. You had mom, you had dad, but you had both mom and dad now working. But education was very important. They knew all the parents of their children's friends. Again, very close, a very tight-knit community. Fast forward to 2015, we might not have mom, we might not have dad, we might have auntie, we might have uncle, we might have foster parents, adopted parents, we might not have any parents, we might have kids living in cars. A total disconnection. So when we think about that disconnection and we think about what we're responsible for doing in our classrooms, what do we need to do to bridge this gap? Because there is a big, big gap. If we're disconnected, if I don't understand you and you don't understand me, we're not going to get anything done. It's just that simple. It doesn't make a difference what racial background we come from, what our social economic status is, what our religious background is. We don't understand each other. So we already have a problem. So we have to look at, we've identified how this disconnection has came about. What can we do to rectify that, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the students that we're responsible to serve? So, in order for us to work with anybody, in your packet, you have a page that says, who am I? And so the first thing that I want us to do, before we actually do the activity, I'm going to ask each person just to blurt out one word, just to describe you. Just think of one word right now. When you think about yourself, I want you to just think of one word about yourself, and then I'm going to just point and everybody say it, and I'll start off. So, when I think about myself, great, great. That's my word, great. Determined. British.
Mother.
Mother.
Friend.
Friend.
Exceptional.
Exceptional. Thinking.
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Compassionate.
Compassionate.
Resilient.
Resilient.
Fabulous.
Fabulous. Cool. All right. Now, that there was very easy for us, but far too often, when we're asked to say something about ourselves or think about ourselves, we shun from it. Because far too often, if you have an individual that is very confident, that knows who they are, respects themselves, and is able to respect other people, we think that person may be arrogant, or they bullshit. They think they're better than everybody else. And it's not necessarily that the person thinks they're better than anybody else. The person is confident in what it is that they bring to the table. So what I want us to do, let's take about 60 seconds, and this is going to be quick. And we can do it in 60 seconds because we just took a couple of seconds to say who we were with that one word. I want us to take 60 seconds, and I want you just to jot down some things. Pretend if you know somebody in the room, pretend that you don't know anybody in this room. You don't know anybody in this room. And if you had to introduce yourself and tell us something about yourself, what would you say? So let's take about 60 seconds. If I think you need a little more than 60 seconds, I'll give you a couple more seconds. But let's take about 60 seconds to just kind of
You have
write
any
about
extra
it.
package document?
Yes, yes.
Right about ourselves?
Yes, this is just strictly about you. Strictly about you. I don't have any more packets.
That's all
If you
right.
put your name, I have an email list. Oh, yes, they do. Here they go. But if you put your name on that email list as well, I'll send you a packet, and I'll also send you a Monday morning inspiration. I send out Monday morning inspirations every Monday to pump everybody up so we can be able to do what it is we need to do. So let's take about 60 seconds. In. That's mine. Look, you gotta do that. And again, if you fill your name out, I'll send you a packet if you don't have it. And I apologize for there not being enough packets. And there is no right or wrong answer, because you're talking about yourself. So then don't get caught up in what you're going to say. You're just talking about yourself. Because nobody knows you. So you're just talking about yourself. Yes, I did say 60 seconds, and Pete was still writing. So you can stop when you're ready, because he followed exactly my direction. Then when I said 60 seconds, the brother was like, boom, he stopped at 60 seconds. All right, so what we're going to do, for the people that are writing, you can still write while I'm talking, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at what each one of us had to say about who we are. Because when you talk about creating a learning environment, utilizing universal design for learning, and implementing culturally responsive teaching, it is very, 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 very important that you identify with who you are. Because if you don't know who you are, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to have a positive, interactive relationship with the individuals that you are responsible for teaching. And I say that again because across this country, we have a number of individuals that are working on the collegiate level as well as in the K-12 system, and they are disconnected from the students that they are responsible for teaching. When you don't know who you are, you don't know anything about yourself. When we were talking, Leon, when you were talking about thinking and them being confused, you're confused. Now, when you stand in front of your students and you're working, you don't need to be confused. You need to definitively know what it is that you're responsible for doing. So it's important for you to know who you are, because in the process of you knowing who you are, there are going to be things that you figure out that you may not know that make you uncomfortable and or that you have a problem with. For example, something as simple as you're in the classroom and you always call on the girls. The girls get to do everything. They get to answer the questions, they get to assist you, they do everything. And then the boys are going to be like, what's really going on here? You always call on the girls. You never call on us to do anything. And you might say, no, that's not true. But if they bring something like that to your attention, you have to take a minute and you have to sit back and you have to self-assess what's going on. So something simple to rectify that is you could do the old-fashioned way. It's called pick a stick. You can actually write your student's name down on a popsicle stick, and I'm not making this up. Popsicle stick, you write their name down on a popsicle stick, you put them in a cup, and when you're calling on people to respond, you just pull out that popsicle stick. Or for all those tech-savvy people in the room, we can utilize our iPads or our tablets or our phones, and we can do the app that's called Pick a Stick. And you can program your students' names in there, and then just hit the app, and it'll pick a student for you. So again, that's just an example of you just taking the time to assess something as simple as that. Or that you don't give the students enough time to provide feedback when you answer, when you ask them a question. You don't give them enough wait time. I ask you a question, and I say, you don't know the answer, let me go to the next person. So does anybody feel like just sharing some of who you are with us? Just anybody. Would you like to share who you are? All right.
Just some of the words.
Some of the things you said.
Creative, rural, opinionated, determined, grandson, sharecropper, adventurous, adaptive, simple, complex, spiritual, maleness, black ethnic.
Okay. All right. Would anybody else like to share? Okay.
Story.
Okay, that's fine. There's no right answer.
Okay, since I'm not even who I am yet, but I've experienced a lot of challenges and adversity in life and should have been a statistic. However, my inner drive and willingness to be pushed, step into, open, and even brave heart, closed doors, ready to accept what's behind, allow me to grow closer to the woman and leader that I want to be, and that I want to be for others, what I needed from me.
Okay, good. Would one more person like to share?
I feel understand that.
No, there is no right or wrong answer again, because we're talking about ourselves. We're taking a moment to reflect on who you are at this very moment, at this very time. And I think what happens again, not just with us, but with the students that we're responsible for educating, we don't take the time to self-reflect and self-assess. And it's important with the jobs that we're charged with doing, because what we do is very, very important. We have a great responsibility. We are preparing leaders for tomorrow. But if the leaders that are currently in position, if we are not in point, then the leaders that we are preparing to take over when we leave, they will not be on point. So it's important for us to make sure that the climates and the cultures that we are creating, whether we're in a school, like I said, whether it's elementary, middle, high school, whether we're already in the workforce, or whether we're on the collegiate level, have to make sure that the climate and culture is conducive for everybody. That's what universal design and culturally responsive teaching is all about. It's making sure that, everybody, when I say everybody, we mean everybody. There is no girls, no boys, no black, no white, no Asian, no Latino, no straight, no gay, no Catholic, no Protestant, everybody. You have to meet the needs of everybody that you serve. And you may say, oh my God, I can't do that. How can I do that? There's no can't when you talk about UBL and CRT. There's no can't. You can. All of us have the skill set and we have the ability because we've been trained. You might just have to pull it out of you to get you to see how you can do that. So, when we talk about universal design for learning, it's basically a set of principles. When we talk about instruction, when we talk about working collaboratively, when we talk about what materials and resources that we're going to use in the classroom, it is meeting the needs of each individual in the classroom. Period, point blank. So the climate that we're creating is going to be conducive for all of those students that we serve. Something as simple as we have a student in our classroom, you were talking about reading. We have a student in our classroom that can read a little bit, but they can't read all that quite well. So we may have some symbols for them when we talk about representation. Because what UDL does, and we'll get to that in a moment, we talk about multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, and multiple means of engagement. So what we're doing is we're doing and designing things so the climate that we're creating is going to be beneficial to all of the learning modalities in your classroom. So that's what we're creating. And so when we talk about the culture and the culture that we're creating, we're going to create a culture that is conducive to the teaching and learning process. So if you flip in your packet again, it's going to take you to a sheet that kind of gives you guidelines for universal design for learning. And so again, what you'll see with these guidelines is that UDL provides you with a blueprint of some of the things that you can do in your classroom. So you see the 3 points. You see the multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, and multiple means of engagement. So when we talk about the multiple means of representation, what are you going to do to, let's say for example, we'll go back to reading again. We're just doing a lesson. It can be a lesson on the Civil War. Well, we're not just going to take pieces of paper and have the students read about the Civil War. What other means of representations can we have to discuss the Civil War in our classroom? So again, we might have some artifacts. That's a means of representation, so that they can actually see some things. So looking visual, how are we going to represent this Civil War? So again, not always thinking about some of the things that we normally do in our classrooms, but if we have the reading that we're going to do, if we have some of the artifacts, then we might have some people come in to reenact the Civil War. So now we have some actors to come in, so they're going to actually represent the Civil War, and that's going to help with some of that background knowledge when students learn about the different wars. So again, looking at things from a different lens, not always looking like this, but making that lens a little broader. Then when we go into the multiple means of action and expression, when we talk about multiple means of action and expression, normally we pretty much want our students to just sit in the seats, don't speak out, raise your hand. If I call upon you when your hand is raised, you can answer. How can we do things a little different? I want us to think about the students that we're responsible for teaching. Again, you keep hearing me say elementary, middle, high school, collegiate level, world of work. If we go to school 6.7 some hours a day, or we're at work 8 to 10 hours a day, some of us longer, people don't want to sit in a desk, read, or just look at a computer screen. They want to be able to express themselves in various ways and take action in various ways. So how does that look in a classroom? What does that look like? That can look, it might look chaotic to some of you if you don't know anything about cooperative learning, constructive cooperative learning for all the individuals that actually use that model. but allowing our students to express themselves and take action in different ways. And you have to become comfortable when you're utilizing this framework, because it might be something that you're not conditioned to using. You might be conditioned to the good old-fashioned way where we just have about 6 or 7 rows and 30 desks, and we just got that straight row tradition. And pretty much when we talk about on the collegiate level, that is what we see. But we should allow our students to interact with one another. They should be able to talk to one another. So we're going to have a dialogue and conversation. We're going to do something for the elementary people. Even on the collegiate level, it works. We're going to do a think, pair, share. That's important. Like you said, Leon, I'm actually going to present you with some information. I'm going to give you time to think about that information. Now I'm going to tell you to get up and take action, and you're going to communicate with your classmates so that we can dialogue with one another. So that's doing something different. Am I always going to have them, when we talk about expression, am I always going to have them express themselves through writing? Am I going to allow them to maybe act it out? Am I going to allow them, oh yes, to use these new technological devices that we have and tell them to create a haiku deck or go on Socrative and create a lesson through Socrative? And if we don't know about this, we need to be comfortable with this, because this is the wave of the future. And some of us are very uncomfortable with technology, and we need to become very comfortable with it because they're way ahead of us when we talk about technology. Then we move to multiple means of engagement. Engagement is so, so important, specifically when we talk about the individuals that we're responsible for teaching today. Oh my God. Going back to sitting in a chair all day long. Nobody, we don't even want to do that. So if we don't want to do that, what makes us think our students want to do that? And I don't care if we're talking about students that are 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. I have a graduate student that is 77 years old, and she's graduating her master's degree because she was determined to get it done to assist her students and make sure that she is abreast of what's going on, and she rocks. But she is a role model for everybody. So again, what are we doing to allow our students to be more interactive, more engaging? Because somebody standing in front of them lecturing for 2 or 3 hours is not working. And we actually still have people doing that. They stand in front of the classroom and they lecture. I'm not saying anything is wrong with lecture, because all of us do that. But when we think about how the world is evolving and how the world is changing and how the jobs that are being created today call for engagement, meaning that we have to interact with one another, meaning that we don't have to learn how to think critically. We have to learn how to problem solve. We can't do that just sitting in a desk for 6 to 8 hours a day. We have to know how to work together. We have to know how to communicate with one another. And you might hate each other. I want us to think about that for a minute. When we talk about universal design for learning, remember we said all. So meaning we all have to learn how to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. So now that we have created the environment and we have the climate, now we have to kind of transition to how we want this culture that we're creating in this climate with our classroom. And so that brings us to culturally responsive teaching. And so when we look at culturally responsive teaching, we want to take a look at what is culture, we want to take a look at pedagogy, and then we want to take a look at really this thing that we call culturally responsive teaching. So, we have a series of tables here. I'm going to call the table, that's you coming from your own cultural realm, your own cultural background. We're going to use the carpet as mainstream culture. So each one of us is sitting at a table, and that's our cultural background. But one of the things that we have to learn how to do is that we leave our little cultural realm and we come to the bigger cultural realm, which is this carpet, which is mainstream culture. We have to learn how to navigate between both systems. And our students have to learn how to do the same thing. When we talk about being culturally responsive, we appreciate, we respect, and we validate one another. Just because I did not experience what you didn't experience does not mean that my experience is not real. And sometimes what happens when we talk about culture, if individuals haven't experienced what somebody else has experienced, we kind of discredit what that person has went through. not a mother. I have no desire to ever be a mother. I am an awesome TT. I have 2 nephews, and according to them, I rock. So TT is my role, okay? I love being a TT. But who am I to tell anybody about childbirth? Because I can't tell you about childbirth because I don't know. I know it looks very painful. That's all I can tell you. But I can't tell a mother, oh, every mother goes through that. Just stop whining and stop crying. Because a mother is going to look at me and say, something is wrong with you. Just wait till it happens to you. So again, having common courtesy and understanding to acknowledge the experience that that person has, even though I might not have went through that experience, but I'm acknowledging them and they are acknowledging me. When we talk about being culturally responsive, it's very, very important because we dehumanize one another when we don't acknowledge each other. Sometimes when people, for example, when we talk about being culturally responsive, if I look at you and I see no color, you see color, you're in denial. And being culturally, because if I look at you and I say I don't see, because we alike, okay? When I look at this sister here, we have a commonality because we women, but we different. If she doesn't acknowledge me and I don't acknowledge her, we're gonna have a problem because we're discrediting one another. And that's what happens far too often in our classrooms. We don't acknowledge, respect, and appreciate one another. So let's take a look at this thing we call culture and look at the academic definition of culture. So culture is the shared perceptions of a group's values, expectations, and norms. It reflects the way people give priorities to goals, how they behave in different situations, and how they cope with their world and one another. And what I want us to really pay attention through this academic definition is how they cope with their world and one another. So again, your table is your world, okay? But you're going to leave your world and you're going to come to this carpet, which is mainstream culture. So how you cope in your world and how you cope in this world. Some of us are really good at code switching.